We have a really active and engaging time planned for you today. Hopefully not a surprise, but I think even more so than usual. So get ready to get involved. We are going to talk really briefly through the SIG Network news and events. So what do we have going on? What are things you can access in our SIG Network world? I'm going to be sharing the evaluation results from the SPDIG National Meeting. And we just want to say right now, in case I forget later, thank you so much for responding to that survey. We immediately received 63, well, fairly immediately received 63 responses, and that was great. Really a good number. The Directors Webinar Series. So we're kicking off new series. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Continuing the conference conversation. So as a result of reading evaluation results, we got to think about, we being myself, John, and Kelsey got to think about what you were asking for and when we gather and how we might respond to the needs people talked about in the survey. And then preparing for our next meeting, which is going to focus on coaching and have some communication aspects. Oh, and you can see on the top, we're going to have a breakout eventually. So please be ready at that point in time to share yourself via mic and camera if that's possible for you. All right, so SIG Network, always try to remind you that we have shorthand support, and shorthand can be used for your communications of many, many types. We use it for the newsletter. You can use it for your website. I'm sure there are a million other things that it would be good for, but those two come to mind. So contact Kelsey at signetwork.uoregon.edu if you'd like help with that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about mentors in SIG Network in just a second. We had the February SIG Network newsletter go out. It sounds like people received it. It had a lot of information about upcoming events, resources that we have for you. It also had a SPDIG success. So one state's successful work. It's Mississippi. So it's not a cliffhanger for you. And then just some research and resources that might be useful for your work. Coaching series and communication series. So we have had the interviews with project directors for our What I've Learned So Far directors webinars. And so these were interviews with project directors where they got to talk about what they've learned about fidelity and teaming and coaching and different aspects of their work. And it was a great series of conversations. Thank you to all the states who participated in that. We also had innovations shared, like Immersion, which prepares teachers or provides professional learning for teachers in something like an AI environment. It's virtual reality. It's not quite AI. There is an actor that interacts with the teacher or other person who's learning. But it's a great way to get people the competencies, the skills that they need without harming any children in the process. So we learned about Immersion. We learned about great literacy resources in Tar Heel Reader. And that is for children with the most complex needs or students with the most complex needs. So the coaching series and communication series that we're kicking off, the communication series was really kicked off by the SPDIG National Meeting. The coaching series is something that has come up after Kim St. Martin's presentation on a director's webinar, where she shared some work that they're doing in Michigan. And I got a lot of feedback from that and also from the forum session she presented in at the director's webinar, at the SPDIG National Meeting. And it sounded like people were really interested in digging back in the coaching. We stopped community of practice. It ended a while ago. But I think we're going to integrate that into our directors webinars. And so we are interested in hearing from you about what you want to know about coaching and communication. And also if you have any resources, if you have a speaker you would recommend, if you have an article you'd recommend, a webinar, a video, anything that you think might be helpful for other SPDIGs, we can integrate those into the series. The SPDIG program area meeting will be in July in DC at the Project Directors Conference. We are looking forward to seeing you face to face for that. All project directors are required to go, and you may also bring other staff. The SPDIG national meeting is in DC in October. We are saving the dates for October 18th and 19th for that, and we are currently finding a home for our conference. So this is some fantastic news. As I said before, the post-event survey, you all responded, you responded right away. We were celebrating that. And then we got even better news. We put out a call in the survey for folks who wanted to be mentors and folks who wanted to be mentored. 22 people requested support for mentors. 26 people offered their support. So I just want to give us a round of applause. Like this is busy people doing really big things, often wearing about 20 hats in their role, and they still wanted to give their time to somebody else. And to the 22 people who said, hey, I want to learn more, that's great too. So it's really a moment. It makes me feel great about who this group is and how folks support each other. All right, so the SPDIG national meeting, we have our planning committee together, but if you'd like to join them, we could still add a few more people, and they will be planning for both the July program area meeting at project directors and the October 2023 conference, the SPDIG national meeting. Again, save the date, October 18th and 19th. So as I said, I'm going to be sharing the evaluation results from the national meeting. I'll just share I won't share every single qualitative comment, but I will share the high level. And then we are going to take what we saw in the qualitative comments and use them for our conversation today. So we're going to build off the survey. All right. Share this. All right. So we can see it, not see that so well. Who was responding is not quite as important as what they had to say. All right. So overall, the SPDIG virtual national meeting met my needs. So you can see we had mainly agree and strongly agree being a little bit a larger number there. I would recommend that other SPDIG personnel attend this meeting. So you agree, and a few more strongly agree than the time before. My knowledge related to engaging my audience increased. I learned about new tools I can use for my SPDIG work. I had sufficient opportunity to learn about other SPDIG's work. I was really glad to see it was mainly agreeing, because it's always a challenge to get enough time for everything you're trying to accomplish. I will be able to use the ideas gathered. Facilitating networking, which, you know, I feel pretty happy with this because it's a virtual meeting. You know, it's a little bit harder, but I'm sure there is more we could do. Fireside chat. So folks seem to be pretty happy with that. And then core statement and elevator speech cross-state meeting. So we had some feedback that the directions weren't great, that people weren't prepared to do the elevator speech. So today we're going to get a little deeper into the elevator speech. There was some, you know, I didn't really know what that was. I didn't know I was supposed to be prepared. I didn't really feel like we got to get into it in our group. You know, I wasn't sure people really knew what an elevator speech was, you know, got that kind of feedback. So that's something we're going to get into today. Any questions or thoughts about the evaluation? Ah, that's great. I'm just seeing Stacy's comment that she ordered Made to Stick, the art of engagement, or the art of, what is it? It's the art of gathering, and then virtual learning. Fantastic. All right, so go back to today, what we're going to do with these results. So as I said, the communication series, we're starting because we got some feedback in the evaluation and the survey. We also had feedback prior to that after Kim St. Martin and Julie Morrison's director's webinar. And so we're going to do coaching and then also communication. People wanted to know more about elevator pitches. We could talk some more about core messages. Newsletters was something that Ann Hanley spoke about the importance of them, so we can get into how that can help you. We're not going to be able to do it today. We're going to do it going forward. I should have moved that down below. But today we are going to talk about making difficult ideas concrete. That's something we started talking about a little bit at the conference. Going forward, we'll be working more with the success principles and the challenging aspects of your work, the communication strategies that are working for you that you can share with others. We're going to talk about which principles you like to dig into from success. And we'd also like to know, we're gonna skip the Menti and just ask in the chat if you could share any resource, article, or speaker related to communication that you would recommend that we have either for a director's webinar or just share with others on the website. The coaching series, we are still working on April, but we know the backbone of April, which I'll share at the very end. May, we do have a special guest from TNTP, and they've come and spoken with us before. Some of you may know TNTP. It used to stand for, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. It's about
the new teacher project.
Thank you. Thank you. But they now just go by TNTP from what I've seen. And Dr. Janine Blue, I think many of you read the Kraft and colleagues paper on coaching. And this is another paper from David Blazar, who co-authored on the Kraft paper. And it's about instructional coaching personnel and program scalability. One of the main things that looks at is those coaching partnerships and how to help them be successful. And so we'll be thinking about how do you make a good match in coaching partnerships. And so another poll, which we're going to do by chat, is what questions and needs do you have related to coaching? And do you have a coaching article, resource, or recording that would benefit others? So we got these series happening, but we really want to respond to folks' needs. So today's agenda, as I said, we're going to continue the conversation. We are going to hear about folks' bingo cards. So I reached out to the winners, those people who turned in their bingo cards on time, and we have 3 of them here today to share their bingo cards with you. And this was a request that we received in the survey, is that people wanted to, at least some people wanted to hear more about what really stood out for people in the conference, where they heard something that was simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, or the use of stories. So we'll hear from those folks. We're going to talk about want ads, a few more want ads, and how we as a group will respond to them. In communication, we are going to hear from a communication expert about Communications 101. And then from there, from what we've learned from Kristen Kuchiyama, our guest, we're going to do elevator pitches and do a breakout to work a little more deeply in that. We're going to talk about a picture being worth 1,000 words with infographics and making difficult ideas concrete. And then we'll prepare for our next webinar on coaching. So we have Laura Brown, Mary Spencer, Greg Wartenberger. And again, here's the success model. And for bingo. So I see Mary, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mary first.
Okay.
And Mary, thank you so much for being willing to share your bingo card with us and talk us through it.
Oh, sure. It's my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I mean, it's always fun to talk. So I took a look. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I took a look at my Lucid board. Let me go ahead and load that up here. And I decided, because I have at a maximum 5 minutes to talk, I decided to choose 3. And so as I reread all of them, these were the 3 that stood out. And so the first one that stood out is from page 243 of the Made to Stick book. Almost no correlation emerges between speaking talent and the ability to make ideas stick. This tells me anyone can make ideas sticky. So that, like, I had heard that concept before, but it surprised me, and I enjoyed reading that. But it's true that I've often thought that the most effective influencers are the most effective communicators. And now I will be more, I won't think that way anymore. I mean, admittedly, we know that, many people who are really powerful influencers are effective communicators, but it doesn't have to be that way. So the second takeaway that I want to briefly talk about is from Dr. Coffey's session, and she explained PLCs are multifaceted, and we still struggle to move from hierarchical to collaborative teaming relationships. And that one, that just really struck me, and it struck me as very realistic in terms of what I still feel when I'm in interdepartmental meetings. And you've got senior leadership, and these are work session type meetings. And if senior leadership is there, I have a sense that this is quite realistic. And I wonder that, I think the concept of non-hierarchical teaming needs to take root effectively on a mass scale. It's like people have to experience what it's really like before people that are in upper leadership really trust that collaborative structure. And in my humble opinion, I think humility is an effective leadership trait. And I don't know how popular that trait is among our really high level leaders. And then finally, my third takeaway, I love this next concept, but I don't think it is necessarily an easy one. So Hanley spoke about how people need to see who you are. And I try to do that by being responsive and friendly, especially through email, because that's my most popular channel of communication. But it's, I don't know, again, I don't think it's necessarily easy. I do think that the more real we are, the more authentic we do come across. But I know that we have to be careful not to be too personal. We have to maintain, professional boundaries. So I wanted to end my little brief reflection with what are other ways that we can help people see who we are in our communication or in our work. So if people want to post an idea in the chat, that would be great. But I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Coffey to facilitate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. That was great. And it was really interesting to see the software you used for the presentation.
Thank you. That's Presenter Media, and I recommend it. Thank you.
Excellent.
They have a lot of professional, like mine was cutesy, but they have a lot of professional looking PowerPoints that are professionally designed with animations. Thank you so much.
That's great. Yeah, I love Meg added judicious humor. And Stacy was agreeing with the trait of humility being important. Yeah, I mean, it's so much, if you actually see people in person at some point, it does make it so much easier, right? Really miss being able to run down to someone's office and be like, let me just explain this, because I have a harder time writing things in emails. All right, and Laura Brown.
Thank you. Let me get be able to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay. Well, I don't have a great presentation like Mary, but I do want to echo something that Mary said, that what she tries to do and she succeeds in is that she conveys really positive energy in her emails and in her correspondence. And then when you meet her face to face, you realize she's just like that. So she's able to show that authentic self. I really realized when I went back and looked at my card, these things that I identified as sticky from the conference, they have remained sticky. They were sticky at the time and they have remained sticky. And I think the ones that are the stickiest are the ones that hit multiple areas of the success model. It might have been a simple message from a credible, somebody I really felt was credible, but really touched my emotions with a story. So when you see all of those, or it might have been something unexpected. I told Jennifer this, I was really captivated by Anne Handley, and I wanted her book. And I immediately started reading it, and it really was powerful to me. So you can see several of these. Like, think of the letter in Newsletter, and how she was communicating how all of our products need to nurture someone. I also was really struck by her writing GPS, that go, push, and shine, where you have a goal and organize, and you draft, and then you polish it up, and all of those pieces within it. I was also captivated, and I've shared this multiple times with members of my team, of Kim St. Martin's bi-directional model of MTSS. Even though we were starting to do that, I didn't have a name for it, and that made it easier to communicate. I was also, when I was thinking about credible, these are the people that really make me believe, or if it was emotional and they made me care. And so one of the things that really was made me care was when I realized I was responding to someone in one of our groups, and I was expressing my own vulnerability, that the content had made me really tap into that the work is hard, and that it doesn't come quick and easy, and that sometimes it can be a challenge when you've really invested in people and then they're transferred to other positions or they're moving, and you feel like sometimes you're starting over. The core messages from other states also help me see their credible expertise, and how really smart people we have leading this work. I really appreciated, I think it's because I've been around for a long time, Larry Wexler's story and the history of the SPDIG, and how he starts from the very beginning 25 years ago all the way, and how we're constantly seeing new perspectives. So I'll sort of pause there, but I took a lot away from the conference.
Yeah, it's funny. The more the think, the easier the ink. I love that quote. I think it's such a good, it's like, and I live like I'll think, well, I'm exercising. I'm think, well, I do this. And then you're kind of like, you're ready to get it out there.
Right. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share. And what I did realize, because this took me back into my notes, without my bingo card, which was really where I was taking notes a lot throughout the conference, so much could be lost just in this little short time that we've already moved. And there was so much important information shared. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Laura. It's great. And Greg.
All right, I think I've got it shared there. So
it looks wonderful. I love it that you use blue. So different.
Oh, great. All right.
Or kind of the more periwinkle, sorry.
Far bottom left corner here. One of my takeaways from the book, and then also from the conference, is, if you say 3 things, you've said nothing. And so especially for that reason, and then also following my 2 colleagues, who I would just want to emphasize that all of that takeaway around personalizing the message for the listener and really looking for those emotional connections certainly was a theme that also stood out a lot for me. But so I'm only going to pick myself for 2 here now, because I'm at this point. One of them in the far bottom right corner, that data as a summary of thousands of stories. So tell a few of them to make the data meaningful. I find myself, especially as we approach this season of APR, we are living and breathing data and really looking for ways to make that data compelling and meaningful for our audience, whoever that may be. So that was a big takeaway for me, a sticky idea. And then kind of along with that, connecting to big whys in our message. The question was posed earlier, kind of how do we make those emotional connections with our various audiences? And I think by really drawing on those big kind of transferable whys and purpose in our work is one of the ways that, you know, I was challenged out of the conference to really do that in some practical ways. So yeah, enjoyed
Oh,
the
so
time and
glad.
lots to learn. So thank you.
Oh, good. No, this is great to see. I'm so glad it was a useful way to take notes too, because we're always looking for that, right? Like, now that it's not paper anymore so much. Great. Oh, thank you so much, Mary, Laura, Greg. It was great to see you all and to hear you. And see your takeaways. So that was bingo. Bingo was fun. And I loved being able to, I love this one about the flushable wipes. Remember that? I didn't even get to see that chat because I was in interview mode, but something was going down about flushable wipes. All right. Other than flushable wipes, this is for the whole group, what stuck with you and what needs or questions do you still have? So let's just go ahead and take a minute to share in the chat. We can go ahead and, you know, I'll just be quiet for a minute, think a little bit, think back on what really stuck with you, and then you can add to the chat when you're ready. They are not flushable. Sorry, I was supposed to be quiet. Sorry. All right. Hopefully got you thinking. All right, want ads. We started with a want ad from Arizona, and we're going to continue with want ads. Some of them were answered on the board, and so we won't get into those ones, but we will get into a couple that weren't, because we want the whole group thinking about it, just in case you didn't get a chance at the conference. So this is wanted: engaging math tools, digital or paper curriculum, that are culturally relevant for Indigenous youth, K through 12, across all math competencies. So there is Annette's email, if you want to email her, if you want to add to the chat right now, for all to see, but this is something very specific. And we are hoping that somebody, if you don't have that information, maybe you know someone who does. All right, so getting into communication. Now, this is a logo created by Kelsey. And she has an arts background. Textiles are her favorite medium, but she also creates great things like this for us. And so she created 3 different logos. This was my favorite one, but I'll, if I get a chance, I'll show you the other 2 as well, and you all can weigh in on which one you like the most. All right, so getting into elevator pitches. This comes directly from a want ad. Wanted elevator statement for MTSS. And so as I was thinking about the elevator pitch, other than the fact that I've read some books and done lots of thinking about it and been in lots of meetings about it, I was not trained on communication. And so I thought we should probably bring in an expert. And that's when Kristen Kuchiyama came to mind. So we work together here in the Office of Special Education. Well, I'm in the Office of Special Education Programs. She's in Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, which is the umbrella over OSEP. And she is a public affairs specialist and is fantastic to work with. And so I invited her and she agreed to come speak with us. So Kristen, welcome.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll just get my screen up to share.
Okay.
My apologies.
then-
I typically work in
Teams.
typically work in teams, so this may be a little bit of a challenge for me, and for that I apologize.
No, it's okay. And Kristen, while she's doing that, I did ask if she wanted to do 2 truths and a dream, since that's our introduction style. And Kristen, are you feeling up for it?
2 truths and a dream.
Yeah.
So not a
I'm
lie.
gonna miss that part. I gave you a lot of information. All right, so two truths and a dream. We'll let you do it next time because you're gonna come back to us. But two truths and a dream is the introduction style we are using, or an introduction method we're using, because we feel like it helps to connect people a little bit more emotionally. And so, for example, my two truths and a dream, I have a lot, but I'll choose a couple. Two truths. One, I was over the moon about the mentors and the mentees numbers that I just shared earlier. Two, I was really the second truth, I was really impressed by how Kelsey was able to put things together for the conference, for the, you know, the whole setup was so nice and worked so well with the depot page, etc. So those are my truths. My dream is in the next year, we'll come to a place where we feel really like we've moved our communications in a way where the, you know, each SPDIG works with districts or early childhood programs, but they'll feel like that they are reaching them in a better way than they ever have before and able to make more impact there because they were able to improve communications. So that's my two truths in the dream, just so you know. So Chris,
Okay.
tell us about you.
Yes, so maybe I'll think through the two truths and a dream for the next time we meet. But just to give everybody a little bit of background about me, I'm a public affairs specialist in OSERS, which Jennifer had mentioned. I've been with the Department of Education since 2017. I just hit 15 years with the government earlier this week, so that's exciting. Prior to coming to OSERS, I did work in public affairs for the Army as a civilian. So I worked at a research center there. Education-wise, did an undergrad in both public affairs and dance. So I went to school on a dance scholarship. And then because I was being paid to go to school on a dance scholarship, I also decided to pick up another degree, which ended up being communication. I did a really short stint as a long-term substitute teacher. I was a dance teacher, long-term sub dance teacher. But that was before I went on to get my MBA in marketing and nonprofit arts management. So then everything that just kind of led into a career, and now I'm here as the public affairs specialist for OSERS. So I do talk a lot. I will apologize about that. I can be a little bit
talked about
wordy.
this already. I'm going to keep her on time.
Yes.
She's okay with it.
I have a lot going on in my head, and I have to often think through what needs to be said and what can just stay in my own brain. So to talk about Communication 101, I just wanted to start really from the beginning of what is communication, kind of get us, I know you've been going through different talks, learning or discussing different ways of communicating and communicating more effectively. But for the purpose of this presentation, and because Jennifer and I have discussed making this a longer term effort where every few months I may drop in to talk about communication aspects with you all, I just wanted to bring it back to the beginning to really look at what is communication, because often as a public affairs person, I hear we just need to communicate this. And then this should be very easy. We should just communicate. Communication is easy. And where I think people are coming from with that, it's not to belittle the fact that this is what I have spent my educational career doing, my actual career doing, but it's to say, I know how to speak, I know how to read, I know how to write. Communication's easy. I talk to people all the time, right? So that's, I think, where people come from with communication. So today, the couple things I do want to go over are what is communication. I want to introduce a couple basic models of communication, super simple in terms of, you know, just some ideas for what you could possibly think about when you're looking to communicate, and just going through that process of selecting how would you best communicate with people or groups of people. And then I do want to talk about communication noise. So what, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but what's preventing your message from being received in the way that you want that message to be received? How does your audience change the way that you communicate? are you going to communicate the same way with every single person or every single group of people that you encounter? And then, you know, how do we communicate with our audiences? So to start, and I don't, are my pictures, I don't know
The
what's
animation?
being shared on my screen, but
It's,
our photos, you're not seeing those as well,
No,
right?
no
I
photos,
mean,
just the
okay, everybody's videos. I just want to make sure that, because it was blocking it on my screen. But so what is communication? Oop, we're going to back that up. There are a lot of definitions because, like I said, this is a field of study. I mean, there are so many theories out there, much like every field of study. There are lots of theories, lots of ideas out there. But one of the simplest terms for communication that I found and that I like is Turner and West's definition from 2000. Communication is a process in which individuals employ symbols to establish and interpret meaning in their environment. Okay, great, that's a sentence. What does that actually mean? So we're going to break it down a little. So process, what do they mean by process? And I'm going to take these definitions straight from Merriam-Webster, and as a little plug to them, their social media is very entertaining. If you ever feel like following a dictionary on social media, I highly recommend looking at Merriam-Webster, not a paid ad by.
So Kristen,
for me to be doing this.
Our other communication speaker, the keynote for the conference, Ann Hanley, who also is marketing, and you know, you guys have a lot of similarities. Her favorite whatever group to follow was, does anyone remember the waste company or the waste? It was a public waste thing, but she loved and so that's where the
In Ohio, that's about
it was like the Ohio Regional Waste Consortium. So anyways, we're finding great things to follow. Merriam-Webster is actually much more typical than the waste company.
I just find them funny. I think that they like to latch on to socially relevant issues or words. And I just personally find them a little funny. So looking at processes, they define it as a series of actions or operations conducing to an end. So that could either be a short-term or a long-term set of actions, right? It could be a single conversation where you see somebody, for example, in an elevator, you pitch them something, that's the end of the conversation, right? If you don't take it, if it doesn't develop anywhere else. A longer term could be these, the meetings that you all have, that this is a long-term process. You're not going to get all the information that you're looking for in one single meeting. So process can vary depending on what it actually is that you're looking at. Symbols, that means something that stands or for or suggests something else by reason of relationship, association, or accidental resemblance. So that could be a word, it could be an object, it could be a feeling. Environment, the circumstances, objects, or conditions by which one is surrounded. So that could be anything from your environment. So many of us are probably working remotely right now. Some may be working in an office. So that physical environment, or it could be the environment of what is your occupation. So what is that circumstance that is leading you to have a certain mindset? And to go a little bit further with this, we're going to have a cartoon. I am not an artist. I'm not an illustrator. So you can laugh at these cartoons all you want.
I think they're great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I use PowerPoint clip art to try to do this. So we're going to just go through a very short scenario. So we have a setting. It's a dinner party. And we have Sally and we have Bob. All right, so Sally says, "It's so nice to meet you. What type of work do you do?" Bob responds, "I work with reforming and improving systems related to IDEA. How about you?" Sally says, "Wow, me too. That must be why Jane sat us next to each other tonight. The idea is so important and we will help so many people." Bob responds with, "I completely agree. Plus the work is rewarding." All right, so they both think they're on the same page. They think they work in the same area. Everybody's happy. Sally says, "Yes, it's very rewarding. It's really going to transform websites for people." Bob stops and he thinks, I guess the IDEA could do that, but it's great how we work to ensure all children with disabilities have access to a free, appropriate public education. And I'm sure this conversation has happened somewhere at some point in time. Sally looks at him and says, while the idea will be great for people with disabilities, I'm not sure it has to do with the rights you just mentioned. Bob looks at her and says, what do you mean? The IDEA has everything to do with ensuring those rights. All right, so what's going on in this scenario? You can feel free to drop it in the chat. You can feel free to just think about it in your head, but something doesn't seem right here, right? With this polite dinner conversation, there seems to be a disconnect between the two. So A, Sally really needs to reread the purpose of the IDEA because she clearly missed it. Bob needs to speak louder and more clearly to make sure Sally can hear him over the chatter of the dinner guests. Or C, they aren't talking about the same IDEA.
I think the group knows. I'm seeing
All
the
right.
answer.
So smart.
Yeah.
All right. So what's going on here? We break it down with communication, the definition of communication, the process, the start of the conversation to the end of the conversation. It was those couple slides that I showed you. Just a short conversation. Now symbols, this is where we really get into what was the confusion. IDEA versus IDEA. Some of you may or may not know, but Congress, in their infinite wisdom, decided to name two legislative acts with the same acronym. We have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and then we also have the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, which is really about bringing the digital world into current times, making sure things are accessible. A lot of different elements are associated with that. However, they both have the same acronym. They're both referred to as either IDEA, IDEA. So what does that tell us then about the environment, besides it being at a dinner party? Sally's work is related to the 21st Century IDEA. She's working in technology. She's an IT person or works with IT people, while Bob is working in an area related to the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So what we know from that communication exchange is there was a disconnect, and that this communication process, the symbols, the environment, there was something amiss, that even though they were both speaking to one another, they weren't really having the same understanding of what their conversation was about. So I go into that to just kind of lay the groundwork for why we communicate and why we need to be conscientious of what it is we're communicating and how we're communicating to others, and making sure that there's a common understanding and really a common goal that people are trying to achieve. So I wanted to go over two very basic concepts of communication. Or methods of communication. We have a linear model, or also known as transmission, and we have a transactional model. I'll go over this real quick. There are words on this slide. I have pictures on the next. So depending on if you like words or if you like pictures, hopefully I've got you covered there. But with linear, as the name implies, it's one-way communication. So we, as the communicators, are sending out a message to the receiver, who is our audience. We're not necessarily sure if a receiver has received the message or interpreted it in a way that we want them to. I mean, yes, there are ways to know that, depending on what it is. If we want somebody to sign up for a conference, we would know that they received the message and acted on the message if they actually signed up for a conference, something along those lines. And some examples of this are newsletter blasts, brochures, fact sheets, you have memos, news channels, newspapers, websites. Those tend to be linear communications methods. Then you have transactional, and that's more interactive. That's two-way communication. There's both people are involved as both the communicator and the audience, so the sender and the receiver. This typically happens in real time. It can be in person or virtual. And this is, Sally and Bob's conversation. So hopefully after these slides end, they're able to start talking through, like, well, what do you mean by IDEA or IDEA, and get to a better understanding, right, than what we saw in their slides. But examples of this are phone calls, face-to-face meetings, Zoom, Teams, instant messages. Those are all ways of two-way communication where both people are both communicating and receiving messages. And then Jennifer, if there are any questions in the chat, if you want to just let me know, that would be great.
Yeah, so far, no, but potentially
okay.
after this slide. could see it
Great,
coming.
thank you. Yes, that is one of my biggest weaknesses in this virtual environment, is not being able to speak and read read chats at the same time. Okay, so visually, how I've depicted this is we have linear on the left, transactional on the right. In the linear communication model, you can see that we have a communicator and we have a receiver. And in that, the arrow of which is the message just goes from the communicator to the receiver. And then channel, I just use channel to show, newsletter, brochure, those types of elements. So all that means is how the message was delivered to the receiver. Now on the right, we have transactional. So we have communicator, communicator, and there's arrows going both directions. And it shows that it's not just a message, but it's a co-created meeting when they're having these conversations and these discussions. This does not mean that everybody's going to leave this interaction with the same exact feeling and understanding and point of where, what their next steps or actions are going to be. But it means that at some point throughout this conversation, throughout this communication, that they have been able to interact and share information back and forth. Now, one of the things that I want to throw in here is where, okay, linear, transactional sounds easy enough. Where it starts to get difficult and where there's really work to be done, at least I find from a communication perspective, work to be done is looking at what are those noises that are preventing communicator, message, receiver, or communicator, co-created meaning and communicator from successfully happening. And that's what in the communication world we call noise. I'll go over that a little bit more in the next slide, but you can see over here, both modes have, or both sets of models have the same types of noise surrounding them. So they could be physical, psychological, physiological, semantic, cultural. And these are items that can add static, a lack of understanding to the conversation.
Yeah.
So,
and I would love to,
yeah.
could we ask real fast? And then I like this slide a lot because it describes even more, but could you go back to the last slide just for 1 second, Kristen? I'm just curious for folks, what they think right now with the people you work with for your SPDIG. What's the noise that you're most concerned with when you're communicating? You're aware may be a challenge to them receiving your message or being involved in the message if it's transactional.
I think some of the noise that we are concerned with sometimes is the overlap in messaging that comes from various sources within the agency. And there's not always real consistent alignment across that. So that can create some static, if you will. So I think that's one of our areas of concern.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of agreement in the chat with that, Greg, in the current recovery environment, being overwhelmed, right? Like, we've got resources, we've got money, we got these things. And okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks, Kristen.
All right, so some of these items, and this is not an exhaustive list, just to kind of it's more to just give you an idea of what these terms mean as far as noise goes, but physical, that's typically easier to define, right? Are there loud noises going on? Are there sirens? Are there dogs barking? Is there unreliable internet, right? Some people might have spotty internet depending on where they're located. They may not get internet just because there are certain parts of the country, as we all know, where the internet is extremely unreliable or doesn't make it out to certain areas. Those would be physical constraints. And those can sometimes be accounted for, other times they may not be, but those are things that could detract from a message coming across clearly. Then you have the psychological, so beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, something along the lines of, I have most of my friends from where I grew up, they're all teachers. And so often, they're in the past couple of years, their attitudes have been, I'm overwhelmed and I have a lot to do and I need to just get in, get out, do my job, make sure the kids are safe, and then I will consider my day a success. But I do not have the bandwidth to be able to do all of this. Or, one of my friends who she has clearly told me on multiple occasions that she just doesn't feel valued by whether it be the administration or the teacher, or not the teachers, excuse me, the parents, that she just doesn't feel, that's her belief. Her belief is that she is not valued because of some of these other things that are going on. So there's that psychological aspect happening. We know that teachers do feel very, very exhausted, mentally exhausted. I mean, mental health is a big topic of conversation. So then we have the physiological. So that could be things like deafness, blindness, maybe migraines. If someone has a headache, has a migraine, and you're trying to communicate with them, they're going to receive that information very differently than if they were having a migraine-free day. Same thing with illness. Then you can also consider things like room temperature, right? If we go to a conference, there's usually 2 temperatures for a conference: really, really warm or really, really cold. How does that affect you, right? How does that affect how you're capable of receiving information from someone? Well, that's the same thing that you should then consider when you're communicating with other people. Then we go into semantics. So this is jargon such as, acronyms, abbreviations. There are a ton of abbreviations and acronyms in every single field. But like we saw with IDEA versus IDEA, they may not mean the same thing to all people. So looking to get that communication down to a level that is more easily understood by all. Word use, pronunciation, dialect, probably a little less relevant for all of you since you're working in your states. But that can be, that can sometimes be difficult for people if you're working, somebody from Boston is trying to communicate with somebody from Louisiana, right? And I say this because my brother went to school up in Boston and married someone from, my sister-in-law is born and raised Louisiana. So to hear those 2 dialects, I mean, that can be a bit, for me, hard to interpret sometimes, seeing as though I'm from New Jersey and we do not have an accent at all, nor do we talk fast. So no, I know we have accents. So you have that going on. And then cultural. So gestures, eye contact, maybe some physical space between communicators. How do all of these collectively add to how something is being communicated? That's those elements of noise. And looking at how do you account for these elements and realize that they're there. Realize that these are real constraints when you're communicating, and you can't just write them off. You can't just say, I'm communicating about something that I know is good for teachers. They need to just believe it, even if they are tired or stretched too thin or whatever X, Y, and Z, right? There needs to be some onus on the communicator to try to account for those noises that are out there.
Yeah, and our keynote speaker, which was brought up earlier on the bingo cards too, our keynote speaker had a quote that was about having, oh gosh, I have it in a later slide, but it was about having relentless empathy for your audience. Just really understanding where they are right now, or where they're probably going to be when they receive your message.
Mm-hmm. And so that turns into the audience. Who's your audience? Who are you communicating with? And considering who needs to know my message. And this is something that I've found throughout my career, that often people will say, everyone needs to know my message. Everyone needs to know that we exist. Everyone needs to know about this resource. And that's not just Department of Education. The Army Center that I worked for had a very similar, they wanted everyone to know about them. Well, does everybody really need to know about them? Are you really, is that really the end goal of what you're trying to do? So there has to be a comfort level, I think, in recognizing that not everybody cares about what you have to say. So taking the ego out of the communication in order to streamline what you're doing and try to make it more manageable for you as a communicator and the people who are receiving your information. This information should be targeted to them. And to that point, how does the audience change depending on your message? So if I have my target audience, can I segment it a little bit more to make it more effective, right? So if you're from a state that has maybe a number of rural communities, but then also a lot of more urban city communities, is sending the same message to the people in those communities, is that going to be received the same way? Is it going to be, are they going to be able to take that information and use it in a similar way? So the answer may be yes, but then also consider if you have a video that you need to show somebody, if you are in one of those communities where the internet, whether it be, you know, a standard provider like Comcast, Xfinity, some of the other ones that are out there, or even, you know, your phone having access to 5G to access the internet. If you're sending somebody a video to watch, what's the likelihood that they're actually going to be able to watch a video without it buffering all the time? And is that training or resource going to be worthwhile for someone when it might be 15 minutes and great, it's short and sweet, but it takes them an hour and a half to watch it because of all the buffering and the bandwidth issues. So just some considerations there with how you're messaging certain groups of people. And I know I'm going.
Yeah,
I'm talking
we're
a
almost
lot.
ready for breakouts.
Yes. So so looking at this is really, what does this person actually need to know? It's not always the same as what you want to tell them. So you may have all this information for them, but is that really what they need to know? Maybe, maybe not. Consider what they need to know. A lot of these we've touched on already. And then looking at the best way to communicate. So I provided you with one-on-one versus, you know, more of that linear where you could blast it out to a number of people. Each method is good for very particular situations. You have to consider what is worthwhile to you and your receivers. And then this, you know, decreasing the noise. We've talked a decent amount about this, but decreasing the noise, trying to make things easy, succinct, efficient, timely for people so that they are in a better spot to receive that information. And then also realize that communication, you can keep improving it. It doesn't mean that just because you do something once and you did it, that doesn't mean it has to be done the same way every single time. This is something that you can always adapt and change and learn new ways, try different things out to see what works best. And then this is just a summary slide of what we covered. So I will leave it at that because I know I talked a lot.
No, that was great. Thank you, Kristen. And one of the things that was interesting when you were talking about who needs to know, sometimes it's the simple things. One of the SPDIGs was sharing that they have a really, they've collected emails of exactly who needs to know, like in this one group. So they have a listserv that's really, and you know, it sounds so simple. It's kind of old school. It's not high technology, but it's something that is very useful for them because they know they can reach the people who need to know the specifics of their MTSS work.
Yes, it sounds like it would be very effective to blast it out to that group.
Right. So Kristen, thank you so much. I know you're going to stick around if you can. If you can't, we understand as well. But we're going to use what Kristen was just telling us to get back to elevator pitches. So what we have planned is something specific to that request that I was showing you earlier. Let's see. Oh, we're going way back. It was from Roger about an MTSS. There we go. An MTSS elevator statement, elevator pitch, whatever you want to call it. All right, so what we're gonna do is spend a few minutes reading a specific SPDIG project abstract. I took the name out of it, so you don't know which state it is, but it is real. It is happening now. And you're gonna consider for this MTSS project, what would a district superintendent need to know? And if you raise your hand, if you've ever had to present to superintendents. Right, so you get about 5 minutes, if that, to present all your information. And typically that 5 minutes is actually 1 minute with a bunch of people yelling things at you after. At least that was my experience when I worked at an SCA. You know, not mean things, but they just want to know right away of all the things. They have a lot of questions. So consider Kristen's recommendations for decreasing noise. Is it brief? Is it simple? Are you cutting to the chase? Don't bury the lead, because think about psychologically where all the people are. Are you using terms the superintendent's going to be interested in and understand? And what are you helping that superintendent with, right? Like, how are you making his life better with your project? So let's go ahead and take a couple of minutes to read this MTSS description. And this is directly, you know, we take these directly from applications. So that's where it's from. Patty, do you have a question? Or were you just saying that you talked to superintendents? Sorry. I guess that was the superintendent. All right, so let's go ahead and read MTSS, and then we'll break out after that, and I'll give you some good directions for the breakout. All right, was that enough time for people? Okay, thanks guys. All right, so next, we'll go back to some directions. So you're gonna have Lucid boards, and Kelsey is going to drop a link for each group in the Lucid board. Once you get in your small group, choose a note taker. You can take notes on Lucid board and kind of shape it as you talk. But the conversation is going to be about the main elements you think should be in the elevator pitch to the superintendent about this MTSS work. You want to grab their attention, make it concrete, maybe use an analogy, an example. What are a few details? Again, don't bury the lead, get right to it with them. And, you know, thinking of what you might think of one superintendent, you know, and speaking to her, and think about how your MTSS program is going to solve their problem, showing relentless empathy for your audience. And then we'll share the Lucid boards when we come back. Any questions before we break out? Okay.
I'll just share again what I told you when I accidentally came back early.
It was great for me.
Which was our room was really having trouble honing in, because it is going to be so dependent on the priorities of the superintendent. There are, 6 potential outcomes that are all really great, but we don't have the time to highlight every single one. And the one that we highlight needs to be really tuned in to the priority of that superintendent.
Excellent. Which gets at part of what Kristen was sharing, right? Like, do you need to sell everything, or the quote from earlier in the bingo cards, if you say 3 things, you said nothing or something along those lines, right? Like, just gotta hone in.
So I was kind of thinking about how much effort we need to do pre-work in learning about them and looking at their data and anything we can come up with. Because if it really is about two-way communication, and that's best, like
Yeah.
at least 2.5 of those 5 minutes should be listening to them, right? And making sure they understand what we're telling them and making sure when they tell us, we communicate back. So we have way less time than we even think we have.
Sure.
Patty is generous in giving away 2 minutes out of 3 to listen. I'm impressed.
Well, I mean, I want more meetings after that, right?
Oh, okay, good. Yeah,
Okay.
right. But you know, that's a really good point, is like, this is just a meeting to get more meetings, right? We have 3 minutes to get a hook, to get us a follow-up conversation, because there's no way we're going to say it all in our 3 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever we have.
Good. And that was a big part of Made to Stick too, right? Like everyone wants to put every single thing in the PowerPoint, but you're not successful then. Well, good. Thank you for being involved. Thank you for sharing what your takeaways were. I am going to share something because another want ad that we had come up was about how do you share it? So that was takeaways. How do you share something like Fidelity, a difficult tool? Like, we need more visuals. And it got me thinking, just that the elevator pitch is really important. If you can share something with a picture, it is so key. What Kristen Kushiyama has found tweeting for OSERS, OSEP being part of that, is that our communications that have to do with fast facts, which is the data that we have for IDEA, those are always the most viewed and hopefully the most used, right? They love to see these images of data, to dig into the data. It's something concrete that they can work with. This is something that Kristen shared that was what she tweeted. RSA is the other branch under OSERS. And so this is the kind of thing that she tweets that gets a lot of interest, right? It just shares a couple of facts, but it does it in a way that might gain people's interest so that they continue to follow her, so they dig into a larger report. Infographics is something that we had a long time ago. Our communications focused SPDIG national meeting, we had everyone work on infographics or bring an infographic that they had created. It was kind of the dawn of the infographic. And you can tell if you have good vision or have a better copy of this, you can tell that this is a newer project. The Minnesota SPDIG is a newer project. And so they're laying out who their partners are, what they want to accomplish, the implementation stages of doing that. But a project that's been around for longer might have something like this. This is an evaluation report from Kansas. And so they've got data now, right? They've got data that you might be interested in, you want to dig into. And I've got a link to it in the slides in case anyone's interested in actually digging into it. So, we talk about APRs. The APR format is so dang dry. I get it. The status charts are not beautiful to anyone, but you can take those data and you can put it in something that is more beautiful like this. So this is what it came from originally. The want ad was, I had shared this, which I borrowed from, her name is going to come to me, who talks about UDL, Katie Novak. Thank you. Because she spoke for Maine, right? And this was the nailed it idea. Like, when you're making a cake, you have to have some fidelity, right? When you're baking, like I like to cook more than I like to bake because I get to just kind of do, but baking, you actually have to follow it. If you put too much baking powder in there, you're going to know it. So that was the example. And here's the want ad request. And so I was thinking about different ways to talk about fidelity and some of the challenges that come up with fidelity for you all in the SPDIG world, and also for the model demonstration projects that OSEP funds, anyone who works with a school who actually hopes to see evidence-based practices put into place, right? And so I was thinking about me and exercise. So it's my fitness journey, story of implementation stages and fidelity. So I'm going to add some storytelling into this, maybe a little emotion, some things you know about, make it concrete. We'll see how it goes. All right. So in the exploration and installation stage, even into initial implementation, this is after I had a baby. I gained some weight. What do you know? Wasn't in the greatest shape. I actually had to be on bed rest a lot when I was pregnant, which didn't help. And was allowed to like walk slowly. That was my exercise at the time. And so when I started the exploration stages of getting back into shape, I looked for a gym and exploration. I found a gym, in the installation stage, I found a gym. I bought the workout clothes. That's, super critical as a sometimes for some people getting back into fitness. I learned how to use the gym's childcare, not that easy for me at the time. And I tried out different classes. In the initial implementation stage, I started to actually attend classes more regularly. This great infographic, from National Center on Intensive Intervention. I love, love, love it. I highly recommend going to it. I will put the link in the chat in just a second. So you may be asking, I did all those things to get going in the beginning stages, but how was my fidelity, right? I'd found some classes. Was I going regularly? Was I actually like really doing it while I was there? Those kinds of things. So there's adherence, doing it, the exposure duration. Was I getting enough of it? Quality, was it a good class that was really going to help me? Was it specifically targeted to what I needed? Did I need that cardio? Did I need my abs worked, et cetera, et cetera? And was I, as the student, fully engaged through the entirety of the class? I wasn't. That's the answer. But then I found T25. So I'm in a hotel room. I see an infomercial for T25, 25 minutes with Shaun T. That's how the name came about. And when I first started, again, I was just now getting into shape. I had to make adaptations. And this is really important in fidelity, because what we're finding is people can actually, the teachers say, who are using your program, will demonstrate better fidelity. So they'll do the program as it is intended. They're more likely to do so if they're able to make some adaptations, right? Sticking with the essential features, all right? What are the core features? Sticking with the essential features, but able to make some adaptations. Say like they get to have 10 minutes of the literacy period where they get to choose from a menu and use this menu. That's one modification that has worked in the PALS program specifically. So there's a modifier in these programs. She's the modifier. You can see her on the ground. I was doing the modifier activity when I first started. It was still getting at my abs, still getting at my legs, et cetera, but it just wasn't as high impact. And that was working for me. So thinking about those on-ramps to fidelity that you might need to provide that still get at the essential features. I've also, over time, I started substituting in other forms of exercise because I knew it was still going to work out my legs. I was still going to get cardio. I knew what the essential features were of exercise and that I needed it often enough. I knew all those things, but I could start playing around with it because I was getting to expert level, right? Full implementation. And now sustainability, I've been using it at least 4 times a week for 8 years. Potentially I should be using a new program at this point because it's maybe gotten something that I'm too used to it, but that's a conversation for a different day. So that's my fidelity story as a way of taking something like this infographic that's already helpful, but make it really concrete by talking about something that we generally share, which is trying to be healthy and trying to be in shape. So any questions or thoughts about making that some challenging ideas concrete? T25. And it's kind of old at this point too. So it's like at this point, Shaun T has gray hair. He did not in the video. It's like, I know what he's going to say every moment. It's been 8 years, but I enjoy it. All right. So that's me happy at the end of my fitness journey. And I do want to take our final minute to say we are going to talk about coaching next time for our coaching series. We're going to send out the homework to you, and you can also access it on the slides. But we're going to start with just this really, really brief. It's a brief. It's a 1-pager, truly about Texas and the coaching system and how they worked on it. And there's a short video that explains it too. So you could read it, you could watch the video, you could choose one or the other. Just think about the challenges your coaching system has faced and any steps you've taken to build a successful coaching system. That's the preparation. I'll go ahead and put those links in for you right now. And I really appreciate, thank you, Kelsey, for putting everything together today. And thank you to our bingo sharers, Laura, Greg, and Mary. And thanks for everyone who engaged in the conversations in the chat. Let's see if these links work. Nah. We appreciate it.